What's this live on
Mic
Facebook?
had to be unmuted. So we're live on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Minho. I'm a realtor in the Tampa Bay area. Me and my business partner specialize in residential and commercial properties. And today I have a special guest, David Rummell.
Hello, how you doing?
David is a business attorney. And today, if you guys are, we're talking about how to sell your business fast and avoid costly mistakes. Okay. And if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. And if we have time, we'll be happy to answer them. All right. So, David, yeah. So, tell us where are you from? In the Tampa Bay area, that's where you practice law.
Yeah, so I'm with DR Law Center. I started that firm back in 2001 in Florida. Work with business and personal injury clients all throughout the state, and also in some in New York as well. And we help clients buying and selling businesses, and with everyday business tasks. Provide we do business plans, draft and review all types of contracts for employees, independent contractors, operating agreements, putting businesses together, taking them apart. Just whatever a client needs from a business standpoint.
Wonderful. So you see, he has all these experience to help you guys. So, David, when someone is coming to you and they're telling you that they're looking to sell their business, what is the best way to prepare them for that?
Whenever someone comes to me and asks or tells me they're going to sell a business or they're intending to do so, I like to know why, because that's important.
Yes.
Sometimes they have different reasons that they don't really want to sell the business. They feel they're forced to do it for different reasons. Sometimes we could find other solutions. So, but if they really are looking to sell their business and it makes sense for them after talking about everything, then we do a dive into what is their business?
Yeah.
What do they do? How much do they make? A lot of different things we have to ask.
Right. So you're looking for their motivation, right? And their story.
Well, sure. We have to understand why they're selling, what they hope to get out of it. What is their plan after selling the business? I want to make sure they've thought about it. Sometimes people are in a rush for different reasons. Everybody is different. There's no right answer or there's no wrong answer as to why someone wants to sell a business.
Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes a seller can make when they're selling their business? They could leave a lot of money on the table, right? Or they can tell, or using the wrong professional, right? Because many times people think just because you're a real estate agent, you can sell a business. So you have to use the right professionals. So what are some of the biggest mistakes, from your experience, that a seller make?
Well, I think anytime you sell your business, a business can be your biggest asset that you have. A lot of people say it's your house, and for many people it is, but for some people and a lot of business owners, that business is their biggest asset. It could be their legacy, it could be their retirement asset, right? So the biggest mistake they would make would be not getting represented by somebody that understands businesses, that takes the time to listen to them and do an analysis of their business, understand their operations, everything good about the business and everything bad about the business, to really get a good full understanding. Because after understanding the business, then we could try to learn and figure out, okay, how can we value that business? A lot of clients looking to sell their business have a number in mind without any necessarily rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
Some business owners, they've already figured out what it's really worth. They've done some good due diligence, but a lot of people, they don't know. And you don't know what you don't know. It's not their expertise. Their expertise probably lies within operating and running that particular business. And this is a whole different type of thing, trying to understand value of business.
Correct.
So that's the first step, understanding what the value is, so we can get a range of understanding as to what should it be listed at. And you don't want to ever list it right at the dollar amount you want to sell it for. You want to maybe list it with a little bit of a cushion, because people will negotiate that down.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And sometimes, if you don't do your due diligence in the beginning, you can also, value it lower, value it higher, right? And preparing them actually really help them. I mean, you could, when people are selling the business, there's so many moving parts to it. Could be your employees, could you spend a little money, clean the little corner up? So, there's a lot of things that you can do preparing it. So, some of the steps, because I have clients that come to me and they tell me, oh, I'm looking to sell my business. and then their paperwork is so messy, right?
Right.
So like, and I tell them all the time, and first they're excited, and once we get the meeting, and then they sometimes they change their mind, don't they?
I think it's really important to really set some expectations and give them like a little bit of a roadmap as to what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be tell us what you want to sell the business today and tomorrow we're going to sell your business.
Right.
We have to get the right fit. We have to understand their business. We have to get the right price for the business. We have to clean it up. You have to clean up maybe their social media presence.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to it. Their website, whatever it is, there's a lot of things on there internally for their business, the intangible parts and the tangible parts, for them to understand what are we trying to sell. Because sometimes they want to sell a business and they don't want to sell all the assets of the business. We have to understand not just that they're selling the business, but what are they selling with the business? What are they excluding from the sale of the business?
Right.
Quite honestly, there's just so much, and every situation is different. It really takes a really good intake from a client, really good conversation. There's no limit on how much time. You can't say, "Oh, I can get all the information from a potential seller within 30 minutes."
No, you
Can't.
cannot.
Can't do it. 30 minutes might be enough to get a basic understanding as what their intent is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much. It's a good process. It can be a long process, but it shouldn't be arduous. And if you have someone good representing you that really cares and is operating in your best interest as a seller,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be an easier process.
Right. Now, what can the seller do, like, by themselves before they're looking to sell the business, before they call a professional? Example, like count, how many employees you have, how many equipments you have listed. They need to show like their lease, right? Is the lease assignable? Because many times when people sell a business, the real estate may not come with it. Right. So because of that, you want to make sure your lease is assignable. And how much time do you have on your lease? The term is so important, isn't it?
That's incredibly important, because let's just say you're trying to sell your business for $500,000 or $100,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If the buyer is going to get that business and there's 6 months or a year or 2 years left on that lease, that's not going to be good for the buyer. Hopefully the buyer is represented, because the buyer can make that mistake and make that purchase. And then 6 months or a year later, he gets kicked out of his lease. And then he just invested all that money and he's going to really lose the business or have to relocate everything, which wouldn't be a good situation for them at all. So that's just one of the many things that you have to put together. I always say, let's see the tax returns for maybe the last 3 to 5 years, profit and loss statements, cash flow statements, list of equipment, information on employees. I also look at if there's sales tax. I look at sales tax returns. I look at employment tax returns. I've been a business lawyer for 32 years. I have an LLM in tax. I used to restructure multinational companies all throughout the country the first 10 years of my career. I learned a lot doing that. So I've done a lot of deep due diligence, and there's a lot to do in that. So you have to, what I usually do is I'll have an initial meeting with a client, do intake, get an understanding, let them understand how I'm going to work, how I can help them. Want to make sure they're comfortable with that. And if there are any adjustments I need to make or can make to make them comfortable, because that's important.
Right.
You're creating a relationship, because this is not a 1-day thing or even a 1-week thing, or maybe even not a 1 month or 6 month thing. It could take 6 months to a year to sell a business properly, depending on what, all the moving parts. And then, yes, information on the lease, contracts. It's not just leases that we have to worry about assignability for. I have clients where they have contracts that you have to worry about if there is a change in control, if the seller of the owner of the business sells their business, there are provisions in certain contracts, like with governmental authorities and certain types of businesses, where they need to be notified in writing within a certain period of time before a change in control. So there are so many different things and so many different things to look at. I also create a due diligence checklist and an information request, so that so the seller can understand what they're in for, and we can make that as easy as a process as possible, so that they can continue operating the business efficiently while we try to sell it anonymously. That's another thing you might want to talk about, or in your experience, and anonymity and the listing and the sale of a business, I think is a pretty important thing.
Absolutely. And also, you also need to know, sometimes the owner, they may be having special rights like a disabled vet. I'm sorry, not veterinarian. I was
Well, there
talking
are
to a
disabled
veterinarian
veterinarians.
earlier.
There are disabled
Yes.
veterinarians as
Oh,
well.
right, but I mean more vet, or they're part of like a government. They have some type of government with a specialty, right? So you need to know that before that, because sometimes they cannot transfer the contract over if that person is not also a vet. So there's so many other moving parts, like Dave mentioned, that you need to do your due diligence up front, before doing that. Because I remember a friend of mine's bought a business, but they did not look at the lease. They were able to assign the lease. Now, thankfully, the landlord was okay for the business operating, staying there. But with someone who is inexperienced and they did not want to spend the money to let either an attorney or a professional help them, that's a really costly mistake. But that's another conversation we can have about. We can talk about buyers all day long, but today we're just mainly focused on the seller. Is that you want to sell a business, just know that you have to be prepared up front so you can get top dollar for your business, right? It's almost like staging the home properly, right? Property before you're selling it, because that's just so important. Like there are things that you could do to devalue it. Like if you're selling a business, you use the wrong professional. In real estate, you need to sell. Everybody needs to know, right? But in business, you want to sell. It has to be a secret. No one can know, because if someone knows the negative connotation that someone wants to sell a business, it's what?
Well, the big problem with losing anonymity on a listing and
Mm-hmm.
potential for pending sale, right,
Mm-hmm.
is the employees are going to get squeamish.
Yep.
They're going to go start potentially looking for another job. All of a sudden, you have a great, well-oiled running business,
Yes.
with all these great employees, and some of the significant and key employees they're going to potentially leave. You also don't really want your customers know that your business is for sale.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason, there's no benefit to letting people know that the business is for sale, and that's why when you actually are dealing with potential buyers as a seller or representing a seller, you also want to make sure that the proper documentation is provided by the buyers and the proper vetting of a buyer is done, making sure they're financially qualified to make a purchase of the business. Otherwise, if they can't buy the business, even with seller financing, you really shouldn't be sharing your client's information with that potential buyer, because they're not a viable buyer. So it's wrong it's not in the best interest of the seller to do that. Then also signing a non-disclosure agreement, what everyone calls an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. This means that the information we give to a buyer is not something that the buyer is going to be disclosing to other people or third parties. And the thing with an NDA is you want to make sure the buyer understands, if that information gets out, we find out that the buyer disclosed that confidential information that they were not supposed to disclose, they can have some legal consequences. It could be fines, money, whatever it is, based on whatever the language is in the non-disclosure agreement. And then going back to preparing for sale, and you likened it or just brought up the analogy of with regard to a home,
staging
the home.
Yeah.
A staging for a business is and preparing for sale is not the month even before. If you know that and this is better for people that are older, right? If you have an idea, I want to retire maybe when I'm 60, 65. So if you already know that, 2 or 3 years beforehand, you should be preparing for sale.
Correct.
Getting everything together to make it really nice, build certain things up, maybe make your social media presence better, your website better. All these things take time.
Right.
Cleaning up your software infrastructure and your technological infrastructure, all these different things. Cleaning up client lists and making things more easy for a potential buyer to see. And also, just optimizing anything you can in a business, of course, it'll optimize the sales price, which is that's what a seller wants. They want to get the most money for for their business. But a buyer also is not going to pay more than a business should be worth. And so if a buyer is properly represented, which we're not talking about today, then it evens the scale, evens the playing field.
Right. And another thing is that, if a bank cannot finance it, then that's going to be an issue. It means that your numbers are not right. but sometimes you can also do seller financing. So that's really popular in a business section. But also want to go back to what you mentioned earlier is having the right professional, right? Because then they can financially qualify your buyer, because it's so important that you're not speaking to people who doesn't have the means to buy your business, and after they look at it and assess it, they don't like it, they can go out and start running their mouth. And that's why having an NDA is so important. Like, I dealt with other brokers, right? And the funny thing is that sometimes they don't even ask me any information about my buyer. I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
That is
If
crazy.
you were representing the seller, I would be pissed. You're not asking me for NDA, or even asking me from a broker to broker NDA. You're just like putting information and emailing me things, that just showing how much you really care and value that person. So, and yes, in the business brokering side, it's a lot of lawsuit going because of that, right?
Highly litigious.
Yes, highly litigious, because these professionals are supposed to be professionals. They don't do what they're supposed to do. And, checking their website, have them sign an NDA. I even ask them for their ID sometimes, Sometimes they'll share the ID, sometimes they won't. But I need to know who you are. And, and I do qualify these buyers, up front, like, hey, who are they? What do they do? Do they have other businesses? Because that's so
Absolutely.
important.
And why is it important to you?
Right? Because you're qualifying them.
But why is it? Do you know why it's really important to know what they do? Because there may be someone from a competing business is just trying to get a lot of information to try to gain a competitive advantage. That's a big thing. So
yeah.
So what we do is, I'm a business lawyer. I also have my business brokerage. Okay, I'm partners with my son, which is a wonderful, fun time. And whenever we take on a seller, whenever we're looking at any potential buyers, we do a background check on the buyer.
Yeah.
We get a full understanding as who that buyer is. We share all that information with the seller. Do you, seller, know this? Does anybody in your circle know this? Because sometimes there are buyers in the same industry trying to get information on their competitors to build their own business, and without buying your business, they don't really have a real intent to buy your business, your client's business. Their intent is to get as much information as possible on the business so they can reverse engineer and compete with you. And that happens. And regarding, you said some brokers don't even ask for an NDA, which is,
or they don't qualify your buyer.
That is horrible. And here's the reason. In Florida, you know what it takes to be a business broker?
You have to be.
Why don't you tell everybody? Tell everybody what it means.
All
to be
you
a
need
broker.
to do is pass your real estate license.
And so to get your real estate license in Florida, all you need to do is you have to. My understanding, unless it's changed recently, you have to have a high school degree.
Or a GED.
Maybe be a citizen.
I don't remember. Maybe. I don't know. That's
but
a good
anyway,
one.
18 years old at least.
Yes.
Take the class exam if you're not an attorney. Take the state exam, even if you are an attorney. At least when I did it. And that's it. And when you're studying for the exam, you do not learn how to be a business broker. You learn the term business opportunity and what that means in just a few sentences. But there's nothing talking about how to analyze tax returns, analyze human resources, manufacturing operations, services businesses, profit and loss statements, cash flow, contracts. Nobody explains any of that. In other states, you're required to have certain knowledge and qualifications to be a business broker. Here, you do not.
Right.
So that's why you can have someone selling a condo one day, and the next day they're trying to sell you their business. Because I've represented buyers before. On the business broker and business law side, and the selling agent will give me all their information. They don't ask for an NDA. They don't ask about anything, like you said. They don't ask about anything about my buyer. Nothing. And who is that hurting?
The seller.
It's hurting their own client, the seller. So that goes back to your initial question that started all this about what's a big thing. And the big thing is being represented by the right person or the right team.
Yes, absolutely.
It's critical.
It's very critical. And also, we just see so many messy situations, right? To avoid costly mistakes, right? And sometimes, I use someone, for example, some sellers, they're very stubborn. Like when I first, moved down here and I was like getting into the hotel business, and everyone told me, oh, it's not going to sell for that. And that's why the story is so important. And as I spoke to the seller, they were really picky with who they let in their hotel. I'm like, look, you want to sell your hotel, and that's like a business, right? So you need to show revenue. And I have everyone telling me, oh, it's only worth a certain amount. And at the end of it, they made $700,000 over their asking. And they have multiple offers because they listened to me. And which a lot of people would tell them it's going to take them 6 months to a year to gain that price. They could, but in this instance, it did not. It took them a few months because they listened to exactly what I told them. You need to let everybody in. Okay, because you need to generate income. And in a hotel space, they actually have a certain source where they can track and see how much other people make in the same space. So they were able to sell the hotel for like extra $700,000 more than they asked for, which I had buyers and they said, oh no, the revenue is too low, and they keep bringing down the building and everything. But yeah, so that's why it's so important to have a professional and just not be cheap, especially you're selling like one of your biggest asset, right? And when you're looking to sell your business, always good to either work with a business broker, business advisor as well, consultant. That way, you can clean up whatever you need to clean up. And at that time, when you're ready to sell, you can sell it quickly, and then you can attract more buyers, because that's so important. That's the reason why you want to sell your business, to attract the right buyers, not people that's just lowballing you, right?
Yeah, and it's not even about being cheap. I think what sellers need to know is
yeah, okay.
from a net standpoint, from a
Yes.
net money to the seller standpoint on the selling of their business, I don't know the statistics, and probably not something to research, but in every situation that I've been involved in, and I've been doing this for decades, the client's going to make more money with the right representation, net-wise, after paying legal fees to like a business lawyer or business broker. After paying those fees, they're going to get more money in their pocket in most situations than they would if they just tried to sell it on their own. Now, there are some sellers out there that honestly, they don't need the representation.
No.
They are on point. They have that type of background. They know what they're doing, But even those people should seek a second opinion, get a sanity check from a colleague. I just think that's worthwhile.
And the last thing is that when you're selling a business, it's a little different. It is different from selling a property. You still need a closer, and that's why David's here as well, right? You need a closer, and because it's different with a property. And that's why it's important to also use someone that does the proper closing. And it's actually more important for the buyer side than the seller side to use a closer. But that's another discussion, right? That we can go on.
That'd be a whole separate time.
That's another episode.
That's an important thing, because if you go through and you're trying to sell your business, you get the right buyer, you get a situation where you get the right contracts executed, getting ready to close. You have to have proof that ownership changed, right? Of all the assets. And where there are lien checks done on the assets.
There's no lien, yeah.
Because, for example, you can have a big piece of equipment, a couple $100,000 piece of equipment if you're selling a doctor's office, and there may be a lien on that. And then if you sell that, whoever is the buyer, if that lien wasn't cleared, now they're going to have that responsibility, and then they have to go back. It's just really difficult if everything's not done just right.
Absolutely.
There's so much to it.
Yeah, or the seller may have some type of lawsuit with their business.
And a closing attorney should check all those things out before it gets to closing.
Absolutely.
Long in advance, just like in real estate. In real estate, you use a title company. They check all those things.
Absolutely.
A business lawyer doing a closing does the same thing when you're dealing with a business, whether real estate is involved or it's not involved.
Now, is it recommended that the buyer and the seller have their own attorney, or can they use the same closer?
Oh, I think you can use the same. The closing attorney typically is not representing the buyer or the seller in the transactions that I'm on.
Okay.
And first of all, if I'm the business lawyer for a client, I'm not going to I can't be the business lawyer for the other client, buyer and seller, because there's a conflict of interest.
Correct.
It's just not fair. You can't you can't do that, right? But even if I'm just a business broker on a deal, I'm not going to do the closing because at the very least there's an appearance of impropriety, an appearance of a conflict of interest. I don't want that. I'd rather refer that out.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the client says, hey, do you know another attorney for a closing attorney? I'll refer that out to a closing attorney that has
Okay.
no interest in either party. That's
Mm-hmm.
the safest, the best thing. Someone who can't be possibly considered biased.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Absolutely. So yeah, that's something that people need to know as well. And when you said not cheap, people are, and sellers look at their net sheet and they say, no, we could just do a closing ourselves. And they think just shake hand or something like
Because they're
that.
hoping for the best.
I
They're hoping
know,
to
of
net the most amount
course.
of money. And,
It's always
I,
better to spend a couple $1,000s, get
yeah.
it done right. And it's more so again for the buyer than the seller, because once the seller sell, it's your responsibility now.
Unless the seller's also, okay, you mentioned
Yeah.
financing before,
Mm-hmm.
Getting bank financing like SBA, Small Business Administration, or some commercial financing. But there's also seller financing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about seller financing?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, please. Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So seller financing, I guess everyone know what that means, right? When the seller of the property or the business hold the note and they pay the bank. So
yeah. So let's just say I'm buying a business from Min, right? The business costs $500,000. I have $200,000 in cash. The type of business is not a business that the banks want to even finance.
mm-hmm.
The business is strong. Sometimes a bank doesn't want to finance a certain type of business for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find the right bank for the deal. Okay. I have 200 grand prices. We are agreed to 500. How are we going to make up that gap, that 300? Typically, I will issue you a promise to pay,
Mm-hmm.
a promissory note.
Mm-hmm.
It's me as a maker of the note promises to pay you the 300,000 plus some type of interest charge over a certain period of time, with all these different things in there, and maybe a guarantee. You might want a personal guarantee on the buyer.
Oh, that's
Maybe
a
the
good
ability
one.
to take back
Yeah,
the ability to take
that's
the
a
business
good
back.
one. Yes, you want to make sure it's personally guaranteed, right, as a seller.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
also very important to know that if you as a seller or your
Mm-hmm.
representatives of the seller haven't properly vetted financially the buyer, that person of guarantee may or may not be worthless. Right?
Oh,
Because if
yeah.
that person doesn't have anything or does to go after in the event of it, and then the business is something that might not be able to be taken back because they've run that business into the ground. It's a 5-year note. They ran the business for 2 years, sucked it dry of all its value, sold the equipment, although you should maintain a lien on the equipment.
Yeah.
Then until the promissory note is paid in full.
Mm-hmm.
If any of those things are not done properly, now the seller just sold this business for 200,000, or you sold your business for 200 grand. You should have had 5. Didn't work out.
Oh, yeah. That's so important. That's why you always want to have a professional doing that for you. And before we end this, there is this new thing going on, right, about the non-compete. Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh, the law has gone back and forth at one point just recently. First of all, what a non-compete is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If I'm an employer and I hire an employee and we have an agreement where they are not going to compete with my business for a period of, say, 2 years and within 10 or 15 miles of whatever my location is or locations are, then if we agree to that in the past, and maybe now as well, depending on the situation, if they violated that, then I can hire a lawyer. You can hire a lawyer. The employer can hire a lawyer and go after the person for competing with your business in contravention and violation and breach of that contract. Then recently, I don't know, was it 6 months? Time flies. There was a case. It came down that they were saying that non-competes are no longer valid, except for certain types of positions. Right?
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Which wouldn't cover a lot of people. It's just very, very limited. But then they said, okay, well, we're striking that down. Maybe non-competes are good again. It's gone back and forth a little bit.
Okay.
So another thing that employers use, you have that non-compete provision. Then you also have a non-circumvention provisions and different other things to utilize in lieu of a non-compete that you can try to utilize to try to protect yourself. You want to make sure that whoever is working for you isn't trying to take your employees when they leave. It's not just about your clients. It's also about your good workers.
Yeah.
It's important. It's hard to have good work staff.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And how about like for a buyer, like when someone buys your business, right?
Absolutely.
That's what the non-compete. Now, does it apply?
That's a different type of non-compete. That's also a different type of non-compete, right? So you have
Mhm.
non-competes for employees and you have non-competes with prior business owners,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't want to buy an auto repair shop from a
Mhm.
seller, and then that same seller 2 miles down the road or 5 miles down the road opens up an auto repair shop, and they have all the
Exactly.
contacts, they have built up all the
Absolutely.
credibility, and then what do? Then
Mhm.
all of a sudden they take all those clients because they can. So
And
if
they
you
know
can
them. They have the relationship. So how do they
exactly
protect themselves
with a
with that?
non-compete,
Does it
in there,
still stand?
I don't, it should. I have to honestly, the
Yeah.
non-compete should stand with regard to that. And but remember, a
Okay.
non-compete also has to be, if a non-compete is going to be valid. First of all,
Mhm.
if it's going to be valid, it has to satisfy a certain criteria. It has to be reasonable in scope,
Mhm.
geographically.
Okay.
Okay. Although there have been some non-competes that have been upheld that cover the whole country, which boggles my mind.
Oh
But that
yeah.
shouldn't. Typically, we always say a rule of thumb is 10 miles within your location.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Okay.
geographic in scope, geographic in terms of years as well.
Yes.
You don't want. It's hard to say. Okay, I want to non-compete for 10 years or 5 years. A non-compete is not meant to give you an unfair advantage. It's meant to make sure that the transaction was fair
Mhm.
and that the bargain for exchange is you're buying this business and the contacts and everything, and it gives you time to work that business and everything. That's why typically, of course, they'll say 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
Typically,
Yeah.
but there's no right or wrong. This none of this is to be taken as legal advice.
Yes.
First of all, every situation is different. Every
Mhm.
transaction is different. Every contract is different.
Mhm.
But these are just general things to be aware of and
Right.
guidelines to abide by.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense because we were, there's always things up in the air, right? So yes, I guess when you find out, let us know in the next episode because this more so goes to the buyer. When you buy a business, you want to make sure the seller is not going down the street and opening up a business. And that is like what happened. You sold me a business. Now I have to spend money to fix this if it's a property involved. And now the seller already have their own plan down the street. So that's definitely an unfair advantage. So David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Appreciate it.
And if you guys have more questions for David, there's his contact information. David at drlawctr.com.
And if you want my cell number, if you want to put it
Mhm.
in the chat, it's
Uh,
813-951-1164. I'd be
okay,
happy
hang
to
on.
have a consult with you.
813
951
951
1164.
1164. And that is your cell phone or
Yes, ma'am.
your
It's my cell
oh
phone.
wonderful. Wow,
Yeah, we
that's
give all our
awesome.
clients their cell phone.
Awesome.
In my
See,
office.
that's so important when you're dealing with attorneys, right? Always the one that gives you their cell phone are the ones that you should work with because that tells you that they care about you. And the most important thing when you're dealing with anyone is the access, right? The
Accessibility is huge. Absolutely.
It's so important. It's like I paid a lawyer and now I have to like email him for an appointment.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you so much. Now when they call you for a consult, is it free or is a fee up
It's a free.
front?
I provide a free consult, a
Oh.
free 30-minute consult. I think it's important to, as it is, it's going to be a big process and trying to find the right person. They shouldn't have to spend all this money just on the consult. And I enjoy hearing what the situation, the opportunity is,
Yeah.
and maybe I can steer them in the right direction. Even if they don't use me, I can steer them in the right direction.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
See, how often do you guys hear an attorney that would give you a free consult? Okay, so I hope you guys enjoy this video. We're going to have a part 2, and we want to talk about buyers because that's also the most important part. When you purchase something, now you are responsible. That is most important because you have so many people when they want to buy a business, they're so excited, right? But then they don't know about the due diligence. So guys, thank you for watching. You have David's cell phone right there. So feel free to contact him for your free consult and tell him that you heard about him on our podcast. So bye. See you guys later.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.